Hey guys, Mochi here, and we're back with the Runecraft Steel Rebellion Take 2 Draft Infographic update. So Runecraft as a whole hasn't really changed much with the coming Steel Rebellion. It still relies on the same mid-range your opponent to death game plan with a bunch of premium Evo effects, combine that with some really good Evo recovery options with the Genius, the Paula, and the Monica, and then for good measure maybe close out the game with an Abyss Summoner or two. While it is weaker now that it costs 8 instead of 7, it's still a very strong tempo tool for Rune to have to eventually sort of swing the game into the late game. While all these cards are very strong in Rune, it definitely has some consistency struggles of just sort of getting enough lines of them. Your Paulas and your Monicas aren't boosted anymore since it's Steel Rebellion instead of Alter Sphere. So just sort of getting enough Evo recovery, enough premium mid-range options, and even getting the Abyss Summoner in the end. While it is sort of weaker now, you still sort of want one or two in your deck. It can be a struggle, especially like drawing them as well, because Rune has a sort of over-reliance on its power cards relative to just its standard cards. When you hear about Rune winning games, it's usually off Monicas or just a bunch of premium Evo recovery into sort of an Abyss Summoner. But if you just don't sort of get those lines of plays and just have to play like standard good stuff followers, then Rune's much weaker in that sense. So Rune definitely is very strong in this format, still, just because of its high density of really, really power cards, especially if you get like the Monica draft slash tons of Evo recovery drafts. But it definitely does have sort of its issues that are sort of rearing its head around, especially in the future when these two rotate. So going into the new cards, we got the Presto Changer. So it's a 2 point transformation spell, somewhat similar to Fall from Grace. It can't transform your own followers, which is a thing to note, so you can't like promote sort of a 2-drop into the 3/4 body that this generates. Speaking of the 3/4 body, it's not very good in the early game. Transforming an opponent's 2-drop or 3-drop is sort of just helping them. And then in the mid game, the opponent maybe has like a mid-range body. They already like trade into stuff. It's going to be post-evoed, post-damaged, and then you can just clean that up with standard removal, standard Evo slash Evo pings as well. So just trading your opponent's mid-range follower for another mid-range follower isn't very strong either. And if you think towards the late game, sure, you might have the utility of transforming amulets as well, but the main amulets you want to banish, a lot of them sort of have premium effects that already happen. Think sort of like the Dragon Ranch or the Crow Amulet. Those things already spawn followers as well. I'm sure you might snipe a Lapis, but like that's super niche. Transforming any follower, you sort of have like a similar effect that sort of deals with like big stuff followers. While this one doesn't stop fanfares, or the opponent gets to sort of reuse the fanfare by bouncing it back to the opponent's hand. Most of the time when you play Asleep, you can maybe tempo out with like another follower, an Evo follower, or just like a standard mid-range follower. And the opponent is either afraid or they don't have the actual enough tempo to sort of play that follower again because they're going to be pushed too much on board, especially if it doesn't fanfare again. But the Presto does have the benefit of maybe neutralizing like a really premium fanfare effect, something like a Draco Marionette or a Corpse Room Fafnir. But other than that, it's like too niche compared to something like a Sleep Incantation on like the really premium targets that you want to hit. So for that reason, it'll be like here. Maybe like if your deck has like a lot of value, then you maybe can afford to sort of draft it higher as like a niche sort of tech option to deal with like something super unfair, like a Corpse Room, which like boosts Shadow's win rate against Rune quite a bit. But other than that, there's sort of no reason to sort of draft this over like Sleep, which is a lot more flexible, being able to just sort of draw the card even in the mid game slash stun a follower, and then in the late game you can, like I said, just tempo your opponent out and just prevent them from playing a lot of the big drops that this card ends up bouncing. Alright, next up we got the Magissa. So it's a 3.32, 3-2 stat line's better nowadays with 3/3s in the format, and Rune's actually still struggling sort of in the 3-drop department, so you'll draft it already like sort of here. And the fact that all this upside is sort of front-loaded, Earthright Run, Earthright 2, that's not too hard with just snaps and Rabbit Mages being very strong picks for Rune. So just randomly getting just a Conjure Twosome for 3 with 3/2s plus 2/2, or even getting like the extra freebie, sure it's random, but it's a freebie ping on top of that. Most of the time your Earth Sigils are sort of useless on board, useless on hand until you sort of get an Earthright for it. The fact that this is just reasonably premium effects for free alongside like a vanilla sided 3-drop is something you'll favor very decently. And then maybe you can get like the Orichalcum Golem Dream, where this spawns 4 sigils, and then maybe you can get all these together for some Storm Potential Reach. But most of the time, these two effects don't really matter. You're only playing this for like the extra upside of most of the time being a Conjure Twosome with upside, or getting the free ping from it every once in a while. So it'll be like respectfully around here. If you're a higher density Earthright deck, you could draft it a bit higher, but it's mainly the consistency that just keeps it jumping around here, and it'll sort of end up here. So next up, we got the magitech golem. So it's a 3.32, similar to the Magasa, except for it satisfies its conditions all on its own. Speaking to sort of like the Machina synergy or the reward for playing like a bunch of Machinas alongside it, runes already very good at sort of keeping the board neutral. Most of the time, the opponent won't have like 3 or more things on board unless they're really snowballing you. So the fact that this sort of rewards you for sort of losing the game, and it sort of relies on some conditional stuff or just drafting conditional stuff as well, sort of keeping it in hand for some big payoff turn, isn't really sort of the reason to draft this card. This card ends up being like very solid as just a standard like Evo ping / Rackham follower. So you can just do that, like I explained in the neutral video. If this fanfared instead, you could just be like a 5/4, trade it into maybe a life-size body, and then heal with a repair mode. As a bonus, if the opponent has like 2 followers on board, maybe like a 2/2 and a 4/2, you can hit them into the 2/2, repair mode this, and it'll ping off the 4/2. So like that's already very strong. But what keeps it down compared to something like a Grey or an Eleanor is because these cards are better when the board's sort of neutral and they only have like one thing on board. Sure, you can trade in and repair mode it after, and like that's decent. But keeping these cards in hand is like much stronger because most of the time these cards live anyway just because of their stat line. So having the Splendid Conjurer as like a removal, or the Ember / Inferno as a removal, is much stronger than just having a repair mode in hand / having like a 5/4 body on board after. So that's the main reason why it's like down compared to this, as well as just Rune's high density. Like this card's sort of like another Evo ping to sort of add to the pool, and we got Tetra as well, which I guess I'll transition to this card because they do very similar things. Because Rune's already sort of flooded with like Evo pings that are all like under Monica, but you still draft them just because they're redundant effects that you want because of Genius and just the high density of Evos, as well as just keeping the board neutral because most boards just want to like snowball the game against Rune. So going into the Tetra, like I said, 4.34, it's got the life-size body, and then it's got like a bunch of like free spells you can get from it for like random spell boost implications, or trying to get the Machina synergy for the Delta Cannon. It's got the Serried Wing clause where it can recover 1 play point. So if you play this on 5, you can cast both of the cards. The repair mode, I've explained it before. It's a 1 play point spell, so you can use it to heal itself, be like a pseudo Rakam because it heals for 3 onto Machina followers, or just heal in a pinch. And then the Delta Cannon is more interesting. It's a ping that can recycle itself if you played 4 Machina cards on the turn that it was played. So all these cards are Machinas, so this card already satisfies 3 to the condition. It's sort of inconsistent to get off, but sometimes you can maybe get like a 2 drop off it, or maybe end up having like a repair mode in hand, and then you can play all those alongside each other on like 6+ play points, and then you can like cycle it all together. It's worth noting this is an Evo to get the Delta Cannon, so there are cases where Rune is running out of Evos, or they have to save it for something else, and then you only get sort of like a 3/4 that just fanfares for a repair mode. So like it sort of like falls off, but that's similar to like just the standard Evos in the late game. Like most of the times you'll have the Geniuses, you'll have the Paulas, and you'll be able to use this as a premium Evo ping, premium Goliath, not Goliath, premium sort of pseudo Rakam body. And then like all that combined together, like I said, it's just redundancy to sort of the Evo ping effects. You're very happy to sort of pick those up. Some interesting like sort of changelog cards, or cards you might want to look out for. The Miranda / the Anne, more so the Miranda because it's sort of easier to weave out. We have new additions coming in. We have this card and we have this card. These two are 2 Mysteria cards that generate, well, this one technically generates 3. So, but like it's sort of clunky, sort of keeping these in hand because Miranda's only sort of good keeping it in your mulligan, and then you have to have a lot of synergy sort of lining up. So like mainly just sort of the Mogul alongside maybe other Mysteria cards. You might want to consider this as like another like sort of, it's a very high premium like Evo ping if you manage to get it off. Just getting like getting like the free random like spell from this. Like it's all very good value as long as you can discount this to at least like 5 minimum. So the fact that you have 2 Mysteria generators that generate 2/3 Mysteria cards might be a reason to sort of push you towards drafting the Miranda, like maybe a bit higher or in a Mysteria sort of focused draft. Similar to the Anne, you have to be a like high density Mysteria draft, but there are the tools to sort of do it now. So maybe if it lines up, otherwise it's still sort of down here. The Geos, we have a sort of a new card coming in to sort of replace the Staff of Whirlwinds effect, and otherwise not much changes. You draft it mainly just for like the 2/1 Bane body. It's like fairly solid, and just try not to get this to screw you over. An interesting thing to note with the Odin, though, why isn't this as high? Rune's probably the best craft in terms of invocating this card out. I've said it earlier, like if in the neutral video, if you're invocating this out, you don't need this to win, just because you're especially in Rune's case, because you're probably spamming a bunch of Monicas, or you have like a high density of Genius / Palas. spells. Like, that's not the reason you draft this card. You draft this card to be a 4/3 Storm. Rune's not very good at, or they don't really care too much about pressuring your opponent. They just want to sort of mid-range your opponent to death, like I said in the beginning. And the fact that this is, if you relegate this to sort of like the removal role, sure, this has like the flexibility of going face for storm damage, but you have sort of like a lot of effects that are sort of similar in the late game. Your Abyss Summoner is sort of your premium face tool, and then your Servant of Truth. This is the main competition for this card. It's already at common, and you're already sort of drafting this to sort of fill in the 7-drop slot. And these cards do like very similar things. That like you'd rather just draft your Evo Pings or draft some premium mid game than just draft a card that you can sort of get the similar effect off, especially from like a bronze card, especially in my opinion. But it's definitely like a very strong effect. Similarly for the 7-drops, just because Abyss Summoner got like the nerf, the Altar Plane is up now. Just because it's a very premium 7-drop, Rune doesn't have as much competition as slot. Like I said, it's mainly just because these effects are different. Like, these effects are very similar, so you don't, in my opinion, draft Odin as highly, but Altar Plane is definitely different enough, and it gives Rune a board flood and a very premium tool now that Abyss Summoner is nerfed. Alright, not too many other changes here, so going straight into the silver picks, so we got the Mechanical Lifeform. Similar to this card where I said the payoff doesn't really matter, this card definitely does have a lot of upside alongside it. It's just the problem of just keeping all these cards in your mulligan. You have to sort of have this card line up in the big game. In the early game, this card just gets traded away or just pinged away, worse, because it has a really bad stat line, especially in this format and the formats to come, just dying to ghosts. Ghosts, puppets, random free pings the opponent might have. You can just lose the game off this getting pinged off and just get being snowballed from there. The fact that this draws maybe like 0 to 1 cards, maybe you get like the constructed level like Tetra combo to like draw a ton of cards off that, but otherwise, like, most of the time this won't draw that much. It won't draw at all, and like the opportunity cost of playing a 3/1 to sort of get this effect isn't really worth drafting. So the Sagacious Core, this card is very interesting. Initially it was like a bit higher, but it's like trended down, at least in my opinion. Mainly because like the effects that it gives are like sort of redundant in Rune. If you want Evo Recovery, you have these cards that are like much better in the Evo Recovery department. Like, they're much more defensive, they keep you on board, and they don't let your opponent snowball. The theory behind this is if you play this on 3 and you have an Evo ping and you go second, then it's like super amazing. It's like an investigation, and then you get like two draws off it, and then you can Evo ping whatever they play on 3 and then on 4 as well, because you skip the turn and they're gonna at least try to pressure or put something on board. But other than that, like, if you're going first, it's sort of weak, and then especially if you don't have the Evo ping to complement it, it's pretty weak. And then in the late game, like I said, these cards sort of do it better. And even in sort of like the early game situation, you already have like a card to already simulate that effect with like skipping your turn 3 and getting a bunch of value and Astral Divination. And in the mid game, like, this card you still have to Evo to get the draws off it. Spell boost doesn't really matter with like the insights at the moment because the payoff isn't very high. So the fact that this gives you sort of the options in the mid game, when this one you actually have to wait to even draw the cards, definitely puts it sort of under the Astral Divination in the card draw department, and definitely under these 2 cards for the Evo Recovery department. Last up in the silver picks, we got the Hannah. So it might be interesting sort of seeing this card here, because it has sort of all the makings of sort of a premium card. Vanilla stats, 4/5 is very good for a 5-drop, and then just generating a bunch of value on Fifth Rare. It's the knowledge that gives you the circle/missile. It's 2 spell boosts, 2 Mystery moves if you want to lean that way, or just for general good value. It's very solid. But it's mainly just competition, sort of the silver slot and the 5-drop slot. Speaking for the silver slot, we got the Pala, the Genius, and the Abyss Summoner. You're not picking it over those. And then for the Genius, you're only picking it if you have like a high density of Monicas and Palas already. And then like for the Truth, you might be like, oh, this card's sort of better than the Truth. But there's mainly competition sort of in the 3-drop slot versus the 5-drop slot. 3-drops have like barely any competition, and you definitely need to pick up sort of your 3-drops. This just gives you like sort of a leg up. If you curve out in the early game, you just play a 3/3 against their like 2/2 or like 2/3, you can already win the game, or sort of go up on the Valley game just off playing this. So it's strong enough, and then keeps you up on aggro. And then, but for 5-drops, you already have like some very steep competition, and especially in the sort of common slots, this is a pseudo 5-drop, and then these cards are like very solid 5-drops. This is just another sort of 5-drop to add to the mix. It's very premium. It might go up when the Genius and the Abyss Summoner rotates out, but for now, it's sort of like here. As for the sort of changes, or maybe I guess non-changes, we got the Claris. It's interesting. The more value, it still has like the problems of sort of competing with like the premium 5-drop or premium silvers in general. But if your deck has enough value, you can definitely pick it sort of as a tech card, counter your Monicas, counter your prime artifacts, counter your like premium random effects on board. Similar to the Sleepy Incantation, it's all sort of weaker in this format, but still it's a reasonably strong card. You can pick it sort of as a tech option. The more value your deck has, the more you want to sort of have these sort of unique tech effects. But other than that, everything sort of relies on synergy. You're still like relying on sort of these 3 silvers to sort of carry your silver picks. All right, last up we got the bronze picks. So I'm actually going to start with the changelog mainly because it's only just one. The Conjure Golem, you might be thinking, oh, maybe it's because of the discovery or like the new card having like synergy with it. It's actually more because of its stat line. Rune actually has very bad 2-drops, and it still has very bad 2-drops. If you think about the mechanical life form, what I said about the puppets, pings, and just random like one damage things just dealing with this, there's a lot of split board, a lot of pings like those in the format. So the fact that these sort of 1-drops or these sort of 2-drops just die to 1-drop / random pings, and like something like an Owen doesn't even trade very well either. You can like lose the game or get snowballed straight from turn 2. And the fact that you have sort of like a safe 2-drop to sort of pick, if the more value you have, the more you sort of want this effect. Like you might want these more if you have like less value in your deck and you need to like squeeze out maybe the extra synergy from sort of these cards or the extra freebies that you have from these cards. But if you're just sort of like aiming to sort of go for that mid-range game plan and you have like enough value lurking in your deck, you want like to sort of minimize the opponent's chance of sort of like beating you out in the early game. And runes 2 to 3 is like weak. I mean, obviously that's like a bad thing to say. You can just curve out like naturally like Witch Snap into like random 3-drop into like Monica and you win the game from that. But other than that, like there are like random ways that you can just get snowballed by just like losing this to like a free ping or a free 1-drop. And the fact that you can minimize this just by like drafting a Conjure Golem over like some of these is like something worth considering. So that's the main reason it's up. And just food for thought about just drafting 2-drops. Like the better your deck is, the more you might want to default to just a safe Conjure Golem. All right, moving on to the actual new bronze picks. So the Mecha Staff Sorcerer, this card's actually fine as just being a Baleful Strix. The synergy is really hard to get, just keeping Machina stuff in your hand. In the early game, you still have to curve out naturally, so you have to have really good draw order to affordably keep like a bunch of Machinas for the synergy. Rune doesn't draft a lot of card draw. Like these are sort of like filler plus, but other than that, they don't have a lot of other card draw options or ways to sort of draw cards. So lining up in the mid game is very hard just because you're sort of playing these cards naturally as well. So mainly this is just freebie on top of the Baleful Strix body. This is a Machina, this is a Machina, so sometimes it can line up. And if you manage to get like a Robo Goblin or 2, it can make it like a bit easier. But other than that, you're just picking a sort of a throwaway 4-drop body that you play maybe going first to sort of avoid throwing away your Evo Pings, or if you don't draft like your Palas or have like your Burgeoning Genius as early because you can't throw these out early. And then it's like fine as just that throwaway body. Alright, next up we got the Shirati. So this card is actually very interesting. I initially had it like lower, mainly because, oh, this card's not the Evo 2-drop card that everyone got. But it's still like perfectly fine. It's a 2-1 body, so it's like bad in the format, but then it generates like a 1-3 body, which is like decent in the format. And it has like the benefit of like the heal, so it like helps you in aggro. It can act as like a pseudo Conjure 2, something like 2-1 Evo, 2-1 that can Evo decently, and it's a 1-3 that can Evo very strongly. It Evos and then the Butler gains a Bane. So it's very good against like opponents that don't have the Evo ping for it, because 1-3 trades respectfully enough. It trades as good as this just because it gains the Bane stat line, the Bane tag, and then it has a good stat line, 1-3 Evos into a 3-5. So the fact that you trade very well, it acts as a 2-drop that gives you a bit of value back, makes your removal better. It gives you that mini heal that helps you against like the aggressive decks that are definitely trying to push you out of the game sort of early on. So all that combined together, it ends up being like a decent card. Again, like I said, the Conjure Golem, you might value it over it only if your deck has extremely high value and you'd want to sort of dodge being blown out by maybe like 1-3s or like random pings sort of killing this off for free and just being tempoed out in the early game. But otherwise, it's like a very, very strong card. And sort of like the worse your deck is, or the more standard your deck is, the more you sort of want these sort of effects. So the Magiblade Mage. This card was initially higher, but it sort of has like the same problems that like Arian did. Its accelerate isn't as good, like you're only getting a commence experience out of it. But Rune's really good at keeping the board neutral, like I said. And it also has like sort of like late game clunkiness to it. Like you want your 8-drop, you want it to be an Abyss Summoner or 2. Like this is your sort of fallback to it, and it's a very, very solid 4-back. Like it's basically a big enough stat line that like pings 1 or pings 2 things for like 3 damage. Most of the time it'll clear it, most of the time it'll be fine. It's just mainly like clogging up on these sort of effects like Servant of Truth. If Rune always stays sort of like neutral on board, slightly losing on board, then like Servant of Truth is sort of like the the better follower to take. You don't want like too many sort of late drops because Rune likes just chaining a bunch of like low followers together, maybe with like geniuses and Paulos, or like just their Evo pings on like turn 8, turn 9. So like if your sort of end game is just playing like 3 of these to win the game, it's like not the strongest thing in the world. It's definitely a very strong like 1 of or 2 of, but mainly just playing as like an A play 0.44 that pings 3. Mainly it's just the clunkiness of just it being a late game drop, and as well as competition in sort of like the late game slots as well. Last up, we got the Golem's Rampage. So this card's very akin to a sort of a Knight's Horde for Runecraft. It's 5 play points, summon 2 Clay Golems, so that's 2 2/2s on board, and then it pings based on the number of Clay Golems, so maybe like the bonus of having like 100 Golems, or just the Verdict Discovery, random stuff that generates Clay Golems now and then in the future, it gets like random freebie synergy with. But most of the time this will ping for 2, and that's like fairly strong, just pinging off like a post-Evo follower or something random, and the fact that this lets you skip out on Evo, sure, you don't always get like all the Evos in the world, and especially going first, you just need ways to sort of get back the value. This gives you another sort of avenue to sort of skip your Evos turn 5, turn 6 onward, to actually maybe try going for still like the turn 8 now Abyss Summoner Evo. So just ways to sort of skip out of Evos. It's like a bunch of free value, just a free ping attached to like split board, split bodies, and it gets the free Earthright attached too. 5 play points for 6/6 minimum with Earthright proc. It converts your useless Earthrights, like I said with the Magisa, into some actual stats on board, and 2 3/3s on board with like extra like upside onto it is definitely very strong. Definitely very good for Rune, and it'll definitely be one of the stronger cards to lean on for Rune in the future when a lot of like sort of like the premium effects sort of rotate out. All right, I guess that's it for the Runecraft cards, and I'll see you in the next one.